Okay, so that was kind of the academic background. Let's all get on the same page stuff. I'm sure you didn't come to a conference like this for that kind of a thing. You want something that you can take back and you can use. Right? So we'll move into the when and the how of using stories within your instructional designs to make things a little bit more effective. Okay? Now, there are a myriad of ways that you can employ storytelling. And I am not beginning to suggest for a moment that this is an exhaustive list. In fact, I'm only going to go through 4 main ways that I've seen in my experiences that you can effectively leverage storytelling within your designs to improve the user experience. That is feedback and remediation, motivation, rationale, vision setting, change management efforts, sharing knowledge amongst employees, and then using stories as a context-setting cover story for the instruction that follows, kind of priming the pump, getting people ready to receive information. Okay? So we'll walk through these one at a time. In terms of feedback and remediation, I'll give you a real quick example, and then maybe we can talk for a minute if it rings any bells for you. Imagine that you're taking a simulation, okay, where you are learning new effective sales techniques. All right, and through action and inaction and the activity of the simulation, you finally got on a very important top officer's calendar, somebody that you've been trying to get a meeting with for months, and she's always denied you. And finally, the EA said, you got 30 minutes. Now, being respectful of this woman's time, knowing how important she is, you say, I'm going to maximize that time by telling her all this great, deep research I've done about her company and what her problems are. And I'm going to save her the trouble. I'm going to cut right to the chase, and I'm going to tell her how I've got the solution to the problem that she has. All right? Sounds like a reasonable approach. You're being respectful of your audience's time, right? Cut right to the chase, give her the bottom line, and then get to the business. But it's a common green bean mistake, right? Jump into the pitch, jump into the conclusion too quickly in a sales pitch, right? Now, if we were doing this in a traditional way, how would you give feedback when they said, yes, that's the strategy I want to take, submit? What kind of feedback would you typically expect to see? It's the bzzz, the raspberry buzzer. No, you failed to do step number 10 of the 10-step process of an effective sales presentation. Go back to page 27 in the instruction and review that material, then come back and try again. All right? That's what I wouldn't be surprised to see, I should say. Fairly common approach of taking you out of the context of a particular situation and going up 50,000 feet and start talking about the abstractions. 10 steps to an effective sale, as if every sale is exactly the same. Right? What would happen if instead of getting that kind of feedback, you got some feedback that looked like this?
Perhaps the most important part is learning. People think they know everything. I remember one of my Connecticut classmates told me he called up a doctor in the middle of the night, woke him up sometime after midnight, and said, I'm afraid my wife is having an appendicitis. She's got a pain on her side. She feels very sensitive. She's got a fever. It's very tender. Will you please meet us at the hospital? And the doctor said, no. He said, put your wife to bed. Give her a couple of aspirin. My friend said, doctor, why aren't you worried? He said, I took your wife's appendix out 7 years ago, and no woman ever has a second appendix. My classmate said, that's right, doctor, but some men have a second wife. Will you please meet us at the hospital?
I love showing that video because I can watch the mood in the room go up, and there's little giggles. That's not the punchline. There's another punchline. Fantastic example of the danger of assumptions. And actually, it's especially effective because you catch yourself being a victim of exactly what I'm advocating against. You made the assumption that the problem was that, her appendix got taken out. No. You made an assumption. You shouldn't do that. So it's kind of a double story. Think back on the situation that brought this up. You're in a simulation, you're making a sales pitch, you jump to the chase too quickly, and you get this as feedback. This has nothing to do with sales presentations. It has nothing to do with getting on the calendar of important top officers. But the point that's being made is exactly the error that you made. Making assumptions about what the problem is and how to solve it. I guarantee that the moment that audience that's going through that sales training gets in front of a client and is just on the verge of saying, my solution is, they're going to pull themselves back and they'll think about the appendix story. And that's the kind of payoff you want, right? That's the brass ring. That's what we're all shooting for, is change in behavior and application when the moment of need arises. And it's all because of the way the feedback was structured within a story. Amazingly powerful stuff. That was Roger Fisher, by the way. He wrote a great book called Getting to Yes. Highly recommend it. This was from a program that I had a very small hand in developing many, many moons ago as part of my graduate program at the Institute for Learning Sciences. Okay, so feedback and remediation. That's the first of the four. So the second area is talk about motivation and rationale and vision setting. This is a common thing that most organizations go through, change management efforts where, we used to do this, but we thought about it really hard, and now we're doing this, and you need to come along with us, right? And how do you facilitate that shift amongst your employees? And one way you can do it, the common way people do it, is that those above you on the organizational ladder, who are much smarter and get paid much more than you do, have thought about this really hard, and they've determined that this is the right way to go. And unless you think you're smarter than they are, get on the bus, right? We're going this way. Not the most effective way to do things, right? So let's think about, as an example, John F. Kennedy. And the absolutely astounding, I still kind of freak out thinking about the level of effort and coordination that was involved in the moonshot. You look up in the sky and you see the moon and you think, my God, somebody walked around up there. And it's just flabbergasting, right? And you're in the midst of the 60s. There's a lot of stuff going on that needs a lot of attention. A lot of domestic issues, a lot of international issues. And you're going to get up behind a podium and you're going to say, you know what I think's important? I think putting a man on the moon's important. And people think you must have lost it. There are so many other things that money could go towards. There's no way I'm going to endorse you. And yet, he overcame those kinds of barriers and got an entire nation galvanized to do something that was pretty nutty.
Even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us. But if I were to say, my fellow citizens, that we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival, on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at 65,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this dictate is out, then we must be bold. Many years ago, the great British explorer George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked. Thank you.
Groundbreaking speech. Absolutely turned the tide in the way we thought about space, the importance behind it, the energy and buy-in that people invested. And if you think about what kind of message JFK might have delivered in a stereotypical business situation for a similar problem, you might think of something like, our mission is to become the international leader in space industry using our capacity for technological innovation to build a bridge towards humanity's future. Right? Blah, 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 blah. Right? No connection, no emotion, facts, figures, analytical, decontextualized, meaningless. Nobody would have bought into it if that was the message that was delivered. At its core, is that what he was saying? Yeah, that's what he was saying. We're building a bridge to humanity's future by doing this thing. But a completely different reception of the message because of the way he couched it in a story. There's a terrific book out right now called Made to Stick. The Heath brothers wrote this thing. I highly, highly recommend it. I've been using that JFK example for years now, and I come to find out that it was such a good example that the Heath brothers stole it from me, daggone it, and used it in their book. And in having an interview with Guy Kawasaki, they talked about how it was a terrific example of the core message of their book, which is this acronym, the 6-letter acronym called SUCCESS, which stands for simple, unexpected, concrete, credible, emotional, and wrapped in a story. Effective ideas that are sticky have those 6 attributes. And when you juxtapose, you kind of map that on to JFK's story, you see that he hit upon the bullseye every single time. It's a simple, clear message, single message that was completely unexpected, that was very concrete, wasn't ambiguous in the least. It was credible because of who was delivering the message. It was very emotional. It appealed to our pioneering spirit as Americans. And it was wrapped in a story. It was a story about astronauts, but really it was a story about us. Reaching out beyond what we thought was possible, what we thought was reasonable, to do something fantastic. Right? So you could think of this 6-letter acronym as kind of a litmus test of ways that you can make your communications a little bit more powerful, a little bit more sticky within your courseware design. To take it out of the ethereal of JFK and the space race, nothing that I think anybody in the room probably has a touch point on. Nobody's gone to outer space. Let's talk about something that maybe is a little bit more applicable. We talk about core values, right? Every organization successful has core values. And what are core values? Well, there's a great book called Built to Last. It was published a few years ago, and they really talk about core values quite a bit. That it's the essential, enduring tenets of the organization. It's the soul of the organization. It's the glue that holds us together through time. They're so fundamentally and deeply held that they'll change seldomly, if ever. Right? It's who we are as a company. Right? Our core values. The old CEO of Johnson & Johnson said, the core values embodied in our credo might be a competitive advantage, but that's not why we have them. We have them because they define for us what we stand for, and we would hold them even if they became a competitive disadvantage in certain situations. It's that important to me. It's that important to us as an organization that we hold these things up on a pedestal. Really important things. This is who we are. Now, Nordstrom's, assume you know Nordstrom's, right? Great department store. They have a core value called setting employees free. And you think about the typical onboarding course, new hires come in and, rah-rah Nordstrom's, here's the onboarding course. When they got to the part about talking about core values and they bring up the point that setting employees free is one of our core values, you could imagine that they would present that along with a half a dozen bullet points, of other core values and say, look, this is us. Read, remember, live. Next slide. And in one ear and out the other. Nobody doesn't register with anybody. Because what the hell does that mean anyway? Setting employees free? But I could tell you story after story about customer service agents giving refunds on tires when Nordstrom doesn't sell car tires. I could tell you about sales representatives gift wrapping shirts that came from another store in the mall. I could tell you about sales agents in the middle of winter in cold temperatures that went out in the parking lot and started the car for the customer so that it'd be warm by the time they got in. I could tell you the story about the woman who came in with the Sunday circular and said, I want these pants in this color at this price in my size. And they went to the rack and they were sold out. And instead of saying, I'm sorry, sold out, I'll write you a rain check. She said, wait a moment. Went to the cash register, got petty cash, went down to the other end of the mall, went to a competitor's store, bought the pants at full price, returned to the customer, resold them at the sale price, and sent her on her way. Now when I say we have a core value of setting employees free, now do you know what I'm talking about? I've given you tangible examples of real life action that people have taken, and they've been rewarded for taking those actions. We as an organization endorse this kind of behavior. You're going above and beyond to tell the customer they matter a lot. All right? So motivation, rationale, vision setting, change management efforts, communicating kind of ethereal concepts and motivational issues. Storytelling is a really powerful kind of backdoor strategy for accomplishing those goals. It means more than if you just put it up on a bullet point chart, right? Okay.